13. At the University of Nanking Hospital, Dr. Robert Wilson had just finished operating on a patient who had suffered a severe eye injury from an exploding bomb several days earlier. It was a close call. He had to remove the patient's left eye in order to save the other one. When he was about halfway through the surgery, a shell landed about 50 yards away from the hospital and rocked the ground underneath him with a thunderous explosion. Startled, he looked up and, through the window facing him, saw a dark cloud billowing into the sky. He looked at Iva, the 67-year-old American nurse, and the three other young Chinese nurses who were assisting him. They weren't hurt, but they were all visibly shaken. "Thank God," he muttered. Shall we continue, Doc?" Iva asked, her voice quivering. Even though he had started to work as a surgeon at the hospital only 2 years ago, Dr. Wilson felt perfectly at home in Nanking. After all, he had been born here 31 years ago into a family of Methodist missionaries. His uncle, John Ferguson, was the founder of the University of Nanking. His father, an ordained minister, had taught at a middle school in Nanking for many years, and his mother, who had a gift for languages, had run a missionary school of her own. Robert Wilson had grown up in Nanking, nourished by a happy, loving, intellectually fertile environment. He completed his undergraduate education at Princeton on a scholarship and earned his MD from Harvard Medical School. He even taught and worked at a few places in New England. But when he returned to Nanking with his bride, Marjorie, it was like coming home. For the first 2 years after their return, they led an idyllic life of elaborate dinners, elegant tea parties and receptions, festive gatherings, and quiet evenings reading some of the great classics of Chinese literature. But over the past 3 months, nothing but sirens, air raids, explosions, fires, injury, and death. Marjorie had taken Elizabeth, their infant daughter, back to America, and he was glad that they were safe. Nanking was a hideous place now, to be sure, but it was still his home. He had already operated on so many soldiers, civilians, wounded in battles and in aerial bombings, he had lost track of time. Each day blended in with the next. After finishing with a soldier with eye injury, Wilson's next patient was an officer who had been hit by shrapnel while en route to the hospital on a stretcher. The bomb, which landed only just outside the hospital, wounded another soldier and killed 2 others. The wounded officer was lying on the operating table. His eyes were closed, his chest heaving unevenly. Wilson examined his head and face, which was covered with smoke, dust, and dried blood. There was a small piece of metal shrapnel lodged in his head, surrounded by blood-stained and matted hair. He proceeded to cut away the officer's torn, blood-stained uniform. Something on the officer's abdomen, about 2 or 3 inches to the left of his navel, caught the doctor's eye. A birthmark, purple, no bigger than a small coin, but in the shape of a bird with outstretched wings. Wilson had never seen such an unusual birthmark before. "Isn't that something?" he said to Iva. In addition to the metal shrapnel lodged in his head, the officer had sustained 2 other wounds, a bullet hole through his left hand and a gaping flesh wound about the size of an egg on his right thigh, which exposed flesh and muscle. It was not life-threatening. The patients came and went, the hours passed, the shadows grew long, sunlight began to fade. Looking up from the last operation, Dr. Wilson glimpsed the moon, nearly full, rising over Purple Mountain. The moon was so quiet, serene, and so indescribably beautiful. Yet its majestic light illuminated a darkened, nearly deserted Nanking, now a city of shadows that had never seen such sorrow, despair, and mortal fear of what would happen tomorrow. Wilson's heart ached. As he turned to make a final round of the patients before leaving the hospital for home, the first two lines of Libo's Longing, a favorite poem of his, came to mind. Sunlight begins to fade. Mist fills the flowers. The moon, as white as silk, weeps and cannot sleep.